Hey guys, this is Ed Yannette with Keller Williams, Team Yannette, and I'm here with Jeff Brady with Roundtree Insurance, Allstate. We're going to do a quick video on the change of the flood maps and the importance of that and how that's going to affect the price of real estate, your monthly bills and things like that.
Great. Thanks for having me in yet, Ed. Appreciate you coming by the office. We're going to go through a few scenarios with you. Some different things to think about when you're looking at properties or maybe thinking about selling, or just simply the impact on what your costs are going to be. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to take a look at several properties and different scenarios that homeowners can face when it comes to the upcoming maps. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that flood insurance has been around for a long time. The maps themselves do change periodically based on new information that's received, new studies that are done. For Chatham County and the surrounding areas, the last major map change was back in 2008, but we do have some new changes coming up later this year, specifically August time frame for Chatham and Bryan counties. So what you see on the screen right now is we've highlighted the property. It's in the blue, which means it's in an AE flood zone. That means if you have a federally backed mortgage, then you would be required to carry flood insurance. The age of the home will have an impact on whether other documentation will be needed, but with this right now, we know that this house is in an AE flood zone. There's some great tools out there. We're going to hop over to another page real quick, and this one has got the same property mapped, showing that current effective zone. You can see that it's highlighted in the blue here, and we're going to just check what our preliminary zone is going to be. That means that what is it going to be in August? So what you see here is that you see this green that has pulled in. What it shows us, though, is that those areas in green have now moved into they've improved in their flood zone. So in these cases, they're in their X flood zone.
So that one's going from an AE to an X.
Going A to an X. We do, one thing that we have to be careful of sometimes is if you can see how this cuts in, we want to be able to check and make sure that the entire footprint of the structure is going to be outside of that.
Now hang on, that was important. The whole house, the main dwelling, has to be in the X flood zone. If a little corner of it is in the AE, the whole house has to have. I mean, you know, they have to have flood insurance.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
FEMA will always rate you based on the highest risk that the structure touches. Now, keep in mind, if the back of your property may be in the AE flood zone, but the entire house sits outside of that, you're still going to be rated as an X at that point. And the nice thing is that for a property such as this, we know that it's an older home that potentially the pre-firm rates can be quite expensive, and you could go from a couple of $1,000s a year down to $450 a year. It's a huge impact not only on your cash outlay on an annual basis, but can also impact the marketability of a home.
So in this house, I know because it's my listing, there's a garage back here. You can barely see it. Okay, That garage is detached. That doesn't affect.
It's detached, correct?
It's detached.
Detached garage. It's not going to impact that. Now, the one thing that you do run into from time to time from lenders is the fact that they find generally they're going to pull their flood zone determination, and it should show X once the maps change. Keep in mind that it has to be done after they change, so you get this improvement here. But on the same side, there is the possibility at times that they could try to throw you into that, but I don't see that often. So should be the main structure.
So if the main house is up here, you're safe, and then that garage, I mean, I'm guessing it's right back here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and you should be fine. Should be an issue with that. Back to our same property. It's going to give us a little bit more information on this. And so there's our house. We can see.
And there's the garage, and that's the pool and the main dwelling.
Yeah, there we go. So what we're going to do is this gives us a little better idea of what we're going to be up against. And so now keep in mind this is only available in Chatham County as far as this particular option available to us. So here's our flood zones again.
The current flood zone.
This is our current flood zones.
Okay.
And now we can just kind of slide on down and we can take a peek at what we're going to be looking at as far as the proposed. And we may see some areas that will go both directions. So I do want to keep in mind that there are some properties that could be potentially negatively impacted.
But Jeffrey, just in this example, to me, as a seller or a buyer, that's awesome. Because all of a sudden you went from a couple $1,000s a month, or a year, sorry, a couple $1,000s a year in flood insurance down to
$450.
if you chose to have it.
Correct.
You don't have to have flood.
Correct, and it wouldn't necessarily even be required at that point.
Not that I wouldn't. I'd always have flood insurance.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, after the impacts of things that we've seen. Now, one thing that you can look at is that up at the top right-hand corner, you see a property on Wimberley Court.
These two.
And some of these that are going to be cut off, that's what we're looking at. That those are still going to be rated AE, but the one thing I'd like to point out is that even though some of these homes were built prior to there being any maps in place, one thing to look at is you'll notice up here shows AE 10. That's that current map. So some of these properties may not be going completely out of the flood zone, but let's just look back here and we see they're going, they're AE 12 now, and they're going to AE 10, which means that in some cases, a homeowner, while they may not be completely coming out of the zone, their actual elevation at that point may work in their favor. And I'll give you an example. We had a property out on Wilmington Island that we're working on where right now it's 3 feet below the requirement. It's in an AE 14 flood zone. And that particular property is going to an AE 10. At that point, we advised the seller to look at getting an elevation certificate, and they found out that the house is actually at 11.3 feet. Well, that doesn't sound so great right now because it's still a -3, but we know in August it's going to be a +1. So that rate's going to go from nearly $3,000 a year down to about $900.
Okay, so now you're speaking my language because we're saving money. So what you're saying is that it went from an AE what?
AE 14 in this case to an AE 10.
And they were at 11 feet or 12 feet, 11 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to be a foot above.
Correct. They're going to go from being a -3 to a +1.
So 3 feet below to a +1 because of the change. That's awesome.
So in that case, even though this house, they would not be required to get an elevation certificate because of the age of the home, getting an elevation certificate makes sense because not only does it make it, in this case, the listing agent makes it more marketable for them, but also for that property owner, they're going to have greatly reduced costs associated with it. Now, one thing I do want to point out that Ed had just pointed out a couple of properties where the lines have touched. So if we look at the property, say over here on Fallowfield. So if we're looking at this house here, for example, where the line is very close.
Oh, the corner.
Another thing that we can also look at is, and I've got another scenario right now, actually on Isle of Hope, where the insured knows that they're going to an AE 10. Well, the map still, based on the proposed, cuts through the house. Because these things aren't perfect. They may be really good as far as ground contours and change in elevation, but they're not necessarily perfect. This is where you have an opportunity to also do what's called a letter of map amendment. And what that means is that if you get an elevation certificate for a house that's in those special flood hazard areas, say in this case the AE flood zone, and the lowest adjacent grade is above that requirement. So in this case, the ground level at the lowest point next to the house is at 10.1 feet. We know in August he can file for a letter of map amendment. Even though he's still going to technically be in the AE zone, they will pull him out and change him to an X, because he can demonstrate that the house is above the required level, which gives him some flexibility as a property owner to not only be able to do more improvement to the house, it also cuts his costs down on his insurance, and gives him more flexibility to make the house truly his as a new property owner.
Explain that to me, because I've heard you say that twice and it's still a little confusing. They can do a map amendment and be changed to an X?
Correct, but you have to have an elevation certificate done first.
That shows you're above the AE whatever it is. If it's an AE 10, if I'm AE 11, or I'm sorry, if I'm in an AE 10 flood zone, but my elevation certificate says I'm at 11 feet.
It has to be the lowest adjacent grade, not the top, not the first livable floor. So the ground level next to the house.
Gotcha.
So it's on the elevation certificate in section C. The surveyor will put in a measurement for the lowest adjacent grade, meaning what's the ground level at the lowest point
on the property,
on the next to the house, immediately next to the house.
Okay. Oh, now so that means okay. I got it.
So if that is above whatever the requirement is, you have demonstrated that your home is outside of that zone. And so the elevation certificate can provide not only a potential reduction in premium, but it can also provide potentially the opportunity to change the zone.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So what we'll do though is let's look at another thing real quick.
10.
That's a 10.
That's 9. That's 10.
Yeah.
So this dude might luck out and be a 10.
So he's at 10. So chances are, based on this, we know that the 10 feet. And granted, this is a great resource that's out there. Ultimately, it's information. You still have to secure the documents, but it allows you as a property owner to make a great educated decision on whether or not you want to spend the money to do so. So if I know that the flood zone is going to be 80-10, I'm at 10, and then
but Jeff, that might be 10 foot 9 inches. That might be 10 foot.
It may be
6
even higher.
inches,
We
10
just
foot
have
11 inches.
Correct.
Without the elevation certificate, we don't know.
Correct, and we haven't actually gotten into the particular property. But in this case, I can also look at the house.
Yeah, that's an older house, probably built in the 60s. I know.
Yeah, and we can make a determination based off of the picture of it. So if we know it's at 10, and we can look at the house itself, looks like we step up a little bit too. Now there could be some stuff over on the right. I don't know if that's a garage or
that right there. Yeah.
What we've got, but you know, chances are that the house sits up, and if it sits up, our elevation is probably higher. And with it being higher, the actual house elevation may be at 11 or 12 feet.
See, and I know this street real well. I mean, obviously I live over there.
Right.
There's a huge hill. That all these houses are up on hills as you go up there. So, I mean, I'd be willing to bet you that it's a foot higher than...
And it could easily be, and the nice thing about that is that again allows you to make an educated decision on the property, you know, and kind of know, you know, what do I, basically it's called a letter of map amendment.
Okay.
You file it specifically on a piece of property.
So this guy could do that if his house is or the lowest grade next to it is above...
Correct.
10 feet.
This is potential opportunity here for somebody to be able to go in and make a determination. They would still need to get that elevation certificate because that is required. But with that, they could then take that document, file it with FEMA after the maps change, showing it's above, and within about 45 days they'll get a response stating that it has been changed to an X, you know, as long as they meet all the requirements.
Okay, let me review this because I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. This guy's house, okay, is in an AE12.
Currently, correct.
It's going to change to an AE10. And because, let's just assume that the land, the property, the dirt next to his house is at 10 foot 9 inches from an elevation certificate. We find that out. So he can take all that information, letter of map amendment, and turn that in, and then could be changed to an X.
As long as as long as you can illustrate that the house is above that requirement, then that's the case. We actually saw one on Wilmington Island where, based on the current maps, they did that. They even had a basement, and
a basement?
Yeah, it had a basement.
Wow.
I've seen several with basements, and so, but yeah, even with that, because the lowest grade next to the house is above the required level, they were changed to an X. We have one. You can get this, Ed. You'll love this. On Spanish Hammock, out headed towards Tybee. I guess it's an old sand dune that was built on. A local surveyor that I know was successful in getting one changed from a VE zone to an X.
Oh my goodness.
So, but we will see some of those changes that will be illustrated on the maps.
And just so you know, a VE zone is like one of the worst, at least worst, highest cost zones to be in.
Yeah,
and
it's
change from a VE to an X, he's going to name his next kid Jeff.
Well, I wish I had anything to do with it. Now,
that's awesome.
One thing I do want to point out, though, is that there are properties going in the other direction, and you know, don't necessarily. You know, there are some areas around some canals and other things that we've seen. For example, in Wilmington Island, I know that there are some areas that are going to be impacted in a way. So you know, you've got you know, a lot of things. This is actually an area on Wilmington Island, and you'll see that these are the proposed maps, but you'll see what's going to happen here once it loads up. When we go back to the up one. Now you see all those folks that are X500,
Oh, yeah.
and then now many of them are going to be zone. And so, property owners need to know that luckily Chatham County did a nice job of requiring homes to be built at certain elevations, even in some of these X flood zones. So as a property owner, if you're going in the wrong direction, one of the challenges that could be faced with this is that you're no longer eligible for a preferred risk policy. So if you don't have flood insurance now because you're in one of these zones and you're going to go out and try to buy coverage down the line, it could have a negative impact. I do recommend, if you can get it, go ahead and purchase it if you're going the other way. Because it can at least locks you in for a period of time, but it gives you some flexibility when it comes to your rates. Because ultimately, the best case scenario would be that your elevations are high enough and an elevation certificate works in your favor. Maybe you want to accept the AE flood zone. We have several clients that have done that already and looked at what the impacts will be. They wanted to be educated on their purchase. They knew that they were not going to be eligible for that $450 policy, but they wanted flexibility, so they went ahead and had an elevation certificate done prior to the map change, knowing what they're up against. That way they can be an informed buyer. But if you're going in the other direction, unfortunately you're not going to be eligible for that preferred risk, that cheap $300 or $400 policy. You would go to a standard X rating at some point, once your provider has found that. However, you may have the ability to get a better rate by getting that elevation certificate.
Let me just ask you, so any of these houses over here, okay, if they were at, say, 11 feet after they got an elevation certificate, they could apply for that?
They could still potentially look for a letter of map amendment, or
letter of map amendment. I want to get that before I leave here today.
Yeah, LOMA. It's called a LOMA, L-O-M-A, letter of map amendment. And so it just depends. The one thing about flood insurance is that it is on a case-by-case basis. And so a neighbor may have one experience and you may have another. You can see up there on Copperfield Drive, there's a little blip of green
right here,
kind of in the middle there. Well, those properties are going to have a very different experience than those that are potentially next to them. And so one neighbor may remain in an X, one may not. So just knowing kind of what direction they're going. In fact, it looks like one of them may actually be coming out of the flood zone. If you look at that one property right here, you got this one and this one, and then as they come out, there's a real good chance that they're going to be coming out of the flood zone.
And these are newer houses, so...
And these are going to be all built in the 80s and 90s. So the idea is that hopefully that the county did a good job and they're at the area that they need to be. Ultimately, for some of these properties, especially as you kind of come back up, top right corner of the screen, those folks are actually going to go from 811 to 810. So some are improving and some are going in the other direction.
And explain real quick how they came about, the new maps.
Sure, yeah. So basically for Chatham County, the last major data input was in the 70s. And so you can imagine how strong computing power is, information is available today. And so this process started in 2009 by a firm in Jacksonville that started doing this for FEMA. And it was a long stretch of coastline. We went from a very low resolution grid system to what I consider high resolution, down 30 meters as far as the grid system goes that was used for the measurements. And with that, we're seeing them, as you can tell, when you've got some of these cul-de-sacs that are lower and areas, they're really picking up real ground elevation changes. And so that's why we're seeing some of these properties that in the past maybe the X zone kind of bled over into it because they just didn't have the ability to pick it up. Well, now we're going to see them where they go into these changes in zones.
And what did you say about they did scenarios with 4 different storms and supercomputers, and I mean that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. So what's really interesting about it, and I got to sit in with engineering as they went through all this. Although being an insurance guy, it was not necessarily as exciting. However, this firm in Jacksonville basically took all kinds of historical data from 5 storms that had some impact on our area, how it impacted, where the water measurements were, water direction, speed of the storm. And when the system was able to basically duplicate what actually happened in those storms, They pumped hundreds of hypothetical hurricanes and tropical storms and other things coming across Florida, up from the Atlantic, over from the Gulf, all kinds of impacts to see what each one of those did. And based on all of that data that they've been crunching for the last few years, they finally presented the preliminary maps to the coast of Georgia in August of 15. So this is going to be a 3-year process.
I know, I've been bugging you about it for 2 years.
Yeah, oh yeah. July of 16, they were presented to the public. And then in the last 2 years, we've been going through a process, appeal periods and other things. And then finally, on February 16th, the municipalities within Chatham County received letters of final determination on February 16th, which basically says that on August the 16th, the maps are going to be effective. Now Bryan County's August 2nd, Camden County and Glenn County's maps are already effective. And I do have to point out that there are sections in northwestern Chatham County that will not be impacted by this. They have already been changed. In fact, they were part of a riverine study that was completed in July of 14.
But I mainly deal in Chatham County. I do Effingham, some Bryan County, but these tools we're looking at, this is just for Chatham.
This is Chatham County, and
But if they needed somebody lived in Bryan and sees this video and like, oh my gosh, what's my flood insurance? They can just call you and you can help.
Absolutely,
Okay.
we've got a number of tools available. Some of the things that we can do. We do have the ability to kind of pool resources from some of our counterparts in other counties and be able to take information that the state provides as well as what the local officials provide, and then the elevation certificates for newer homes, for example, to be able to make a determination on what that should be when the maps do come in. Yeah, a lot of great tools available, and we're here to help.
Well, guys, listen, this has been about a half hour, so I know it's a long video, but it's important, and a lot of folks are going to save a lot of money. A few folks are not, but the vast majority of this is positive. If you have any questions, please contact myself, Ed Yannette, or Jeff Brady. I'll have all the contact information in the description of the video, and there'll be beginning and end in the middle of the video where you can get our phone numbers. But Jeff, man, thank you very much, dude. This was unbelievably informative. I've listened to this 3 times, and it's still I learn a ton every time I hear it. So, but yeah, I appreciate you, bud.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye.